Alright, and welcome. This is going to be my first live streaming tutorials tips video. So what I'm going to go over today is how to create a barn door style animation for whatever your recording software is. So I'm using OBS over here right now, and you can use this transition as a Stinger transition. So it's kind of important as a Stinger transition that, well, I shouldn't say it's kind of important. It will not function unless you have a period of opacity that is covering up the entire screen. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and open up After Effects. Alright, I'll go ahead and maximize. I don't know why to start maximize. And create a new project. And a new composition. So the composition that I'm going to be using today is going to be a 60 FPS graphic. This is a custom composition. It's basically just 1920 by 1080 square pixels, frame rate 60 FPS. I like to use 60 FPS because when you're having fast motion, because you have to create a Stinger graphic, it's going to be relatively quick. It's going to be 2 seconds at max, and it's used for transitions. So the main point here is to make sure that that graphic opens and closes relatively quick, and that the frame rate that you have is going to be able to track that. More frames per second, the better. So I also don't want to make it too terribly cumbersome for processing, so I'm just going to go ahead and keep that resolution full, 2 seconds as the time duration, and just keep it at 60 frames per second. I mean, obviously you can increase that frames per second, but then you're going to have to do some creative post-processing. Okay, here is After Effects. If you guys have not seen After Effects before, on the left side over here you have the project panel / effects control. Down here on the bottom left you have all of your compositions, and this is where you perform all of your animation and your time synchronization and all of the other fun stuff in After Effects. Over here on the right, sources, effects, and it's all your added stuff, what you can do to After Effects. And in the middle here is your actual render screen. So there's a couple different ways to look at this. One of them is to show transparency right now, and the other one is to show a default background. I have mine set to white. That was part of the options in the previous screen. But I also like to see the transparency. This is good if you're trying to get high contrast. So, alright, let's go ahead and move into it. So, I'm going to go ahead and create a layer, new, and go ahead and create a new shape layer. And I'm going to create a shape layer that is white, and stroke that is, well, the stroke's going to be taken away because it's 0 pixels, but I just set it to white still. And I'm going to go ahead and create a shape. So this is going to be my standard polygon shape here. I'll go ahead and edit, undo that. After Effects is a little bit finicky sometimes. And double click on it and make sure that I'm actually selecting this, and then I can drag and drop. Bam, there, I can manipulate it from there. Keystrokes. So I'm holding the Alt button when I zoom in and out. That makes it so you can zoom in and out to particular areas. So if I were to just zoom in and out, it would zoom in and out to the center of the screen. If I want to zoom in and out to a specific zone, like over here, this is where I want to center it, hold down Alt, zoom in and out. That's how you do that. Okay, so I'm going to want to give this a little bit of a rotation, and everything that you can perform up here on this screen, it can be performed inside the transformation and the contents down here for the shape. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this shape. I'm going to call it white rectangle. And I'm going to press OK. Part of the rotation, I'm going to want to control the rotation. So I'm going to set this to be a, it's currently at 90, so it's going to be a 45-degree rotation. Bam. Call that good. I want to scale that back a little bit. That's a little bit too intense. So let me set this to 22.5. And that looks pretty good to me. Okay. I'll back this off over here and get this off of the screen. Doesn't need to necessarily be off the screen completely. I'm kind of starting to set a starting position for the animation. Or, sorry, an ending position for the animation. So I'm seeing what looks good. So an important thing to note, if you are doing a moving graphic here, in this instance, unless you change the actual Y position along with the X position, whenever you move something in, there's a chance that if you don't make it the graphic large enough, that when it passes through, you'll start to get transparency behind it. So for good measure, I'm just going to go ahead and change the size of this up just a little bit. I'm not necessarily going to be making it as any specific size. It's not important. And setting that off screen. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Create a new shape layer. This is how you create new layers. And I'm going to first, before I do that, click down over here and deselect the white rectangle. Because what you saw here is I just created a new rectangle. Don't want to do that. Alright. I'm going to click down here, new shape layer, go to fill, and I'm going to set it to my theme color. Create a rectangle over here that is also rather large. And After Effects is messing with me again. Doesn't quite function like Photoshop that I'm used to. Alright, and going to go ahead and maintain aspect ratio. Also going to give this one, close this down a little bit, give this one a transformation, same rotation of 22.5 degrees. Call that good, and as you can see when I bring this bad boy over here, that they'll line up. So it's okay if we get a little bit of overlap, because I'm setting the white below the orange, and it kind of just, it wouldn't matter because of the way the layers work inside any sort of photo editing software that isn't MS Paint. So that's how that works. So quick tip here, Control-Alt-Home will set this point right here, the anchor point, back to the center of the object. And we're going to be playing around with the anchor point when we assign it's referred to as a null object to this. So null objects are used frequently in After Effects because you can assign whatever the transformation happens inside of it to the null object, and then that null object, you can't see it, but then you can assign that movement, that rotation, whatever effect you set to the null object, you can assign it to another real object, and it allows you to easily scale it if you're going to have lots of objects that are following this. And I'm going to show you that in a second here. Okay. Alright. I'm going to go ahead and create a text layer. Now, this over here is going to be my orange side, so my text is going to be white to contrast with that orange. So over here I'm going to check the text settings before I start typing. Hero, bold, I'm going to set hero to regular. This is the font I prefer to use. I like the way it looks. It's a nice rounded look. And I'm going to go ahead and change it to a white color and start typing. So this is way too small, most likely, so I'm going to bump that up to 72. And then say, photography. And you guys are like, oh, I can't see anything right now. And that's good, because I'm going to move this layer over here. Let me rename this to orange rectangle. And move this into the center of the screen. Bam. That way you guys can see what the intended effect is going to look like. Alright, so selecting this layer, I'm going to go ahead and move this over here somewhere. Where I'm moving it to right now doesn't matter, because I'm going to assign it to a null object. so that when these two things come in together, they're going to both slide in together. And then when they slide in together, they'll be able to track the null object, so I don't have to assign the movement twice. It's really handy ways so you can increase your efficiency, and sometimes there's things that you can't do with anything other than a null object to assign it to. A good example of that would be tracking, motion tracking. While you could assign it to another object, if you assign it to the null object, you can always change the tracking parameters afterwards and then have multiple things track it, so it's really handy to use null objects. Alright, once again I'm going to go Control-Alt-Home, set that back to the beginning, or set that anchor point back into the center of it, and I'm going to go ahead and change the paragraph settings over here to align right. The reason why I'm aligning right is because it allows me to have it come from the side and it doesn't look weird. If I have it coming centered, it just aesthetically is unpleasing. So once again, when I did that, I moved the anchor point, so I'm going to go Control-Alt-Home, set the anchor point back to the center. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and, you guys aren't going to be able to see this off screen, but I'm going to import my graphic that I'm going to be using in here. And I'll just bring it, bam, into this. This is my splash screen graphic, and I'm just going to go ahead and resize this. Oop, did not mean to do that. Go ahead and resize this down. So what you can see that if you just start moving your cursor, what happens is that you'll resize in many different aspect ratios. It also allows you to flip the graphic backwards and forwards. So if you're trying to create a 3D animation effect, this is actually a relatively easy way to go about doing that. It's just by changing the scale so it flips upside down and back. But that's not what we're trying to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and move this back to the center over here, and I'm going to hold down Shift to maintain aspect ratio, and I'm going to make it about equivalent aspect ratio to my logo over here. It's slightly larger. Sorry, to my font, slightly larger, so that it'll look nice like that. Okay. Alright, now that we have all these objects created, let's go ahead and create a null object. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Null Object. And then what you'll see here, I'm going to go ahead and turn the visibility of these guys off because it's not important right now. It produces this object that is just an empty box. So what we're going to do with this object is we're going to give this object movement. And then after we give this object movement, we can assign that movement to the other objects, because After Effects is something really, really cool. It's basically an internal scripting engine that can assign stuff to things. That sounds a little bit complicated, but they made it really easy by using something that's called a pick whip. It's this little icon right here. And you can assign parenting, you can assign a bunch of different attributes for this. And I'll definitely get into that in future videos, but to keep it basic this time around, all we're going to be doing is assigning the position to it. And we're going to be moving some anchor points around. Okay, so I'm going to use two null objects in this case. I'm sure there's probably a way to do with one using the text parameters, and I'll have to figure that out, and if I figure it out, I'll show you guys how to do it with one. But I'm going to be using two null objects here. I'm going to go ahead and Control-Alt-Home to put that center point, anchor point, back in the center of the object, and I'm going to go ahead and assign some movement to this. So down here, let's get into this panel down here. I'm going to have a nice sip of my refreshing beverage first, though. Alright, this panel down here, like, what is this panel? This panel is your animation timeline. So I'm going to move this over a little bit, starting at 0 frames over here, all the way up to 2 seconds. And you can see that each one of the keyframes that are assigned over here are assigned in the number of frames per second that we have. So I set it to 60 frames per second. So the middle frame here, after it goes from 59th frame, goes up to the 60th frame. I'll also zoom in a little bit so you can see that. So from 59th frame to the 60th frame, and that's the new second. So this is kind of how you can control if you want a symmetrical looping or otherwise kind of repeating graphic that has an accurate specific timeline that does things. This is the easy way to do that, is to make sure that you are using whole time intervals, and that's the render time for each frame per second. So in this case it would be 60 frames. So I'm going to go back to the first frame, and let's just take a look at this null object. I'm not going to actually do the assignments right now. I'm going to show you what, well, I am going to do assignments, but I'm going to show you what the assignments do. Alright, so let's go ahead and pop that orange rectangle back over. And, sorry, I just locked it. I'm going to pop that orange rectangle back over, and I'm going to, on the null object, open up its transform properties down here. This is where the null object kind of exists in space and time for this instance. So over here you have its actual physical position on the screen, and then over here you have its scale, its rotation, its opacity, and as well as its anchor point. This is a 100 by 100 null object, so the anchor point for it is directly in the center of it, so it's going to be 50-50. Anchor points are relative to the upper left, upper right corner, or sorry, the upper left corner of the image. So over 50, down 50. Hope that makes sense. Actually, might be lower left. If you guys know, let me know. But 50-50 would be the center point of this square. So over here we have what is our time settings for keyframes. So to keep it kind of simple, the time settings for keyframes are how we tell it to start and stop a transition or animation. So I'm going to go ahead and do a start animation with the position. So I'm going to want this to start off the screen. So I'm going to move the position all the way off the screen. And like so. You guys might be wondering why that was there. That's because this is the center of this rectangle. So it's saying, hey, you want to clip to the center of this rectangle. And it honestly doesn't matter where I clip to, but I'm going to clip to right here because that looks good to me. All right. We can also do align if I want to align to the vertical center of the composition. I guess press that. I was pretty close, to be fair. So we're going to start with the vertical center of the composition, and if I want to align to the horizontal center, I would press this button right here, but I don't want to do that because it's going to reset this position over here. I have to do that process all over. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this null object some movement. Exciting. Alright, so we're going to start at this position right here. Actually, I'm going to start slightly closer to being on the side of the frame. I'm going to align to the right of the composition, and then I'm going to align to center once again, and just move this slightly off frame. I'm moving it slightly off frame because I'm going to make a reference to the other objects in this with the pick whip tool. And it makes it easier if you have it slightly off frame to set the anchors and stuff like that. Doesn't really make it easier, I guess. I like it like this. So I'm going to go ahead and, because you could technically move the anchor to anywhere, and I'll show that in a second. All right, moving it to off the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and align back to a horizontal center, a vertical center. Vertical. Okay, so in order to start an animation, you have to assign a keyframe. So I'm going to say that at this point in time, which is over here at 0 seconds, at this point in time, the position is going to be at its current spot. So in order to say that to After Effects, what I have to do is I have to press this stopwatch. After Effects, as you may have seen right here, produced this little dot. This little dot is called a keyframe. Sorry, that's actually a diamond, not a dot. There are other indicators here for center points and stuff like that, but we're going to focus on this keyframe right here. So it produces keyframe, and that's cool. What can we do with that? So if I want to move this little null object right here onto the screen, I have to basically assign a new keyframe, which would say that at a certain point we're going to move that null object onto the screen. So I'm going to go over here, and it's an easy way to move around the timeline if you guys would like to do this easier rather than just dragging the random keyframes. If you have a large, high amount of time thing, it's going to be very difficult to granularly. Is that a word? It is now, granularly. Heard it here. Get to a specific timeline. So I'm going to go ahead and set it to 1 second, and bam, you can see, moved it over there to 1 second. All right. We're going to go ahead and move this null object onto the screen. Exciting. So I'm pressing and holding the shift button down. This locks the axis rotation to either X or Y. You can see here, Y-axis, X-axis. There is 0 transposition on the opposite axis. So make sure, if you want nice smooth movements, that you lock the axis that you are intending on moving by holding down the shift button. And I'm going to move it over here onto the screen. And once I did that, you can see here that it automatically created a keyframe. Great. That's what we want. All right. So let's see this. I'm going to go ahead here, and I'm just clicking on the composition. You don't actually need to do this. You can click on the timeline too. It'll do as well. I click over here, and I'm going to press the space button, and you'll see this little red box. Actually, you won't, because null objects are hidden. All right, let's work on that. I'll show you inside the animation panel. So it's going to go like over here, and it's going to end up at that point. Well, that's not what we want. We want it to end at that point, and then we want it to be able to open back up. So we're going to go ahead and copy this keyframe. Just click on it, Control-C, and then scroll to the timeline that we want to post it. That would be 2 seconds. Click it. And it didn't recognize 2 seconds for some reason. Let's see why. Scrub back. Huh, interesting. Alright. After Effects, you're playing tricky on me right now. Okay. So, 1 second and 59 frames. Okay, I'm not 100% certain why After Effects is choosing to do that, but, you know, we'll just roll with it. So, at the 1 second and 59 frame spot, I'm going to click on, I'm going to scroll my timeline out because that's a little bit distracting. I'm going to click on the, ooh, is that Y? No, that couldn't possibly be Y. It couldn't be that easy. Let's click out here. Move this to 2 and see if that did it. Sorry guys, I will explain what I did in a second here if that works. Nope, didn't work. Alright, let's go back. Set at 1 minute, 1 second, 59 frames. After Effects, I'm still learning After Effects. It's tricky, but it doesn't mean I can't provide you guys value. Alright, and we're going to Control-V, make sure, and paste that by selecting Position, of course, and then pasting it. So, because we selected Position, you can kind of see here, I'm going to scroll out a little bit more on the timeline so you can see a better scrubbing of it, that it goes over here. I'll start from the beginning. It comes into the screen, and then at that keyframe, boom, it moves out of the screen. And we're going to do all kinds of cool stuff with that in a second. Alright, let's go ahead and assign an object to that. That's exciting. Let's go do this. This orange rectangle has been staring at us for far too long doing nothing. We're going to make it do something. Scroll back to the 0 and drop down this orange rectangle here. And go ahead and use the pick whip. This is called the pick whip. We're going to pick whip the position. Whoops, wrong one. We're going to pick whip. You want to make sure that you have your object selected as the object you intend on referring to something. So if I were to have just moved that pick whip down here to this object position, it would have set all of that work we just did in the null object back to being where the orange rectangle is, that position was. So that would have been bad, and I would have had to press Control-Z and you know, talk about that later. Alright, so we're moving that orange rectangle onto the position, so pick whipping it to that. Okay, cool. Let's see what that did. I'm going to go and click this. You can see, oh man, that looks really wrong, but kind of interesting, I guess. so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to transpose an anchor position. So the anchor position is currently at 1750x and 96y. So because we know that, actually, let's go ahead and see here. 0. Yep. Because we know that the null object is centered on its anchor point, what we can do here is we can set the y position to 0, and that centers the orange rectangle. You guys can't see me. I'm having my hands over the orange rectangle. It centers that to the null object center point. And then we can adjust this anchor point here, the x-axis anchor point, either direction, and then see how that moves where that position is. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set that to 100. See how that looks? Okay, not quite off screen. And set to 0. Not quite. And negative 100. Boom. Okay. Going to want to get that as close as possible. There's probably a scientific way of doing it. I don't know it. So, all right. Let's zoom in right here. Let's see, are there any orange pixels? No. Okay, perfect. Zoom in to center of screen. If you hold down your spacebar when you click, it causes your entire screen to move. It gives you the little hand icon. This hand icon's up here. Conversely, you could do that, press the H button, but who has time for that? All right. Move it over here. And we're going to go ahead and press the play button. You see here, bam, it comes in and out. So this is going to be the key principle for our animation, is that this happens like this. So I am satisfied with the animation like this, but it's not quite at the right spot. So what am I going to do about that? Well, I'm going to go over here and scrub to the timeline of exactly 1 second. And by doing that, it's 1, 0, 0, because that's what we had our transition point set over here. And I'm going to make sure we select this, and now I can modify this null object by double-clicking on it. So position. So I said that it should be a little bit more on the x-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to 500, and bam. Reason why I knew to go down is because this is the origin down here. Handy tip. All right, so bam. Now it goes in and out like that, and that is a lot better animation. I would like it to have a little bit longer of a little bit quicker of a build-up and then slow down. Or actually, I want it to be able to go off the screen fully before it returns. You are only going to see this once when you do a Stinger transition, so you won't actually see that, but kind of irks me a little bit that it's not quite off the screen. So let's go ahead and adjust this this here value of the anchor position for the orange rectangle. Let's go ahead and change that a little bit more. Ooh. All right. Oh, yes, that is correct. All right. That is not functioning the way that... Oh. That's because I'm a moron. This is what I'm trying to do. Okay, adjusting that back. What you guys just saw there should go in the blooper reel. I was trying to change the position because that's normally how you would move an object. I'm moving it by the anchor point, so that's not how I'm moving it. Alright, so let's go ahead and see that again. Bam. Alright, that looks good to me. Okay, so because we have the orange rectangle below the white rectangle is on top of it. And other way around. White rectangle is below the orange rectangle. We can kind of do a little bit of an overlap, and that'll create that animation like that. Alright, so what we're going to want to do is do the same thing. Create layer, new, null object. Actually, before we do that, let's add the text to this. Alright, so what we care about with the text is that when the center of the screen happens, the text is in the correct spot. So let's go ahead and look at the text. I'll pop this back up on transparency. This is the spot we want the text to be, right here. Maybe a little bit over to the left. That's the spot I kind of picked beforehand. Move it over here. That's kind of where I want it to end up at. And when I pick whip this to the position of the null object, it's going to reset that position to another spot. So I'm kind of just making a mental image that this is where I would like it. All right. There's probably some math I could do to figure this out too. This isn't a math channel. This is a photography slash how to do stuff inside Adobe Products channel. So we're going to do it this way. All right. So, and also there's lots of different ways to do things. If you guys have a better way that works for you, leave a comment below and tell me what that way is, and I'll probably listen to you and try it out, or not. It's pretty much 50-50 at this point. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and assign that transformation position to that null object again. And go ahead and we're going to pick whip that position over here. Bam. Okay. See, it moved it a little bit off. It's not bad. Not bad. We can work with that. We can work with that. All right. So let's go ahead and move that position, or that anchor point rather. Let's go ahead and center it onto the null object. And that moves it down. And let's go ahead and move that back. All right. So we got a lot of bit of work to do here. There we go. That looks good to me. All right. Let's go ahead and go back to over here and play that. Boom. Comes on screen, goes off. So as you might be able to say, man, that's really quick. I don't really like moving that fast. We'll get to that right now. Okay. So when I highlight these 3 points and I right click on them, I can go to the keyframe assistant and go to easy ease. Just by default, let me show you what that does. So you can see that those keyframe icons actually turned into those little hourglass icons now. That's because it has easy ease assigned to it. And you can see how that brings up that that like little poke out there at the end, like it's just a kind of peeking out. So that's what easy ease does by its default. It changes the velocity of keyframes. So what we're going to do here is we could do one of two things. Say that looks good and just leave it alone. Or we can go ahead and modify those curves. So what I'm going to do is modify the curves. We're going to go ahead and click the graph editor over here. And let me pop up. Alright, edit speed graph is on. Alright, make sure we have our null object position. Okay, so I am in edit speed graph and the null object position. You can kind of see here, this is a graphical representation of how that object was moving. And we have the position that we have set over here. And at the velocity at that position is going to be 0 because it's rotating back the other direction. And then it's going to kind of pick up velocity towards the middle and then slow down. So I liked the picking up velocity part. I thought that was good. What I want to edit is to make sure that it kind of pauses in the middle a little bit. I want that peak to come on, and then I kind of want it to transition back. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the graph editor over here, and I'm going to shift that to the left. So this is changing the influence of that position. I'm making sure that this position has a lot more influence, so it causes it to make it so that that speed is less there. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and click over here as well, and you can see it's doing the exact same thing for the opposite direction. We're kind of just mirror those curves out. Alright, let's go back to our initial keyframe. Let's play it. Bam! You can see how it kind of does that little slow down and pause in the middle now. That's exactly what we want. We want that slow down and pause. Perfect. Okay. Go ahead and stop that from playing. And now we're going to do the same thing with the other side. So we're going to go ahead and hide these. And you guys are going to get lots of sound effects if you listen to me. Alright, we're going to go to Layer, New, Null Object. Alright, just going to click off our graph layer here by clicking that button. Now we're back to Timeline. And we're going to create a new null object by going over here. We already created a null object. What we're going to do is we're going to apply the same transforms. I'm going to go to Alt, Control, Home, set that back to the middle. Go ahead and align this vertically centered to the composition. And I'm going to move this off of the canvas by clicking, dragging, and holding Shift, so it only transposes on the x-axis. So there we go. got it off screen again, and we're going to go ahead and apply that same transformation. Now the orange rectangle is on top of the white rectangle, so we can overshoot. So that's what we're going to do. All right. So go back over here to the beginning of the keyframes. Going to close out the transform for the other null object and click down here. And we're going to go ahead and set initial position. Bam. All right. Now that we set that initial position, go ahead and move over or scrub over to 1 second. Click over at 1 second. And now we're going to change this position. All right, clicking and dragging. So you can see this little box right here. There's a reason why I didn't change the opacity of the other null object. That is where it currently is on this timeline. So we're going to kind of try and do a little bit less than that because we want the orange to overshoot the white. So a little bit less than that. And then we're going to do the same thing we did beforehand. We're going to click on that first keyframe, Control C to copy, and we're going to go to the very end of the timeline. And we're going to click on position, make sure position's clicked, and then Control V. That just set that motion. Let's go ahead and see that. Oh, no, you can't because it's no object. All right. Fooled me twice today. All right, so we're going to go ahead and scrub to see that happening. So you can see how they kind of do that little overlap right there, and then move out. Boom. We get it slowed down so you guys can see that. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and assign these other two objects to it. Let's go ahead and look at the logo here. Bring up the logo. I just brought up the logo, and I'm going to bring up the white rectangle. Okay. So now that we have these up, I'm going to go ahead and move the null object layer down to where these are, because it makes it a little bit easier to see. And go ahead and go to the... I'm going to transform the white rectangle in first, so we can see the white rectangle. That way, I'm doing the white rectangle first, so that we can see the position of the white rectangle, and then assign the logo into the white rectangle space. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and take the white rectangle's position down here. And for some reason, did it already keyframe it? No, it did not keyframe it. Okay. I thought it did. It's trying to trick me. Alright, we're going to take the position of that, and we're going to go ahead and assign it to the position of null object 2, our second null object. And as you can see, immediately off the screen. Perfect. Alright, let's go ahead and go scrub to the middle. And you can see it's way off the screen. Alright, let's go ahead and assign this position back to the vertical center. Or the anchor point is the vertical center, but it is the very vertical center. It's vertical and x-axis center. So let's go ahead and move that on to where we would like it to be on the screen. So I'm going to pop up the transparency of the orange rectangle so we can see where the orange rectangle is on the screen. And I'm going to move that anchor point. Anchor point. Anchor point. And move that anchor point until it just barely overlaps. That's where we want it. Okay, let's go ahead and see that silky smooth action once again. I'll go ahead and I'm going to turn on this. But that right there, I'd like to see that come in. That looks great. Okay. And well, we're going to go ahead and press spacebar to stop all that nonsense. And we're going to go back over here, and we're going to do the same thing with the logo. All right, transform the logo. Go ahead and take that position for the logo and whip that position over here to the position of the null object. Slightly off screen at this point. Ooh, that's so close. That's so close. Kind of overshoots. So we're going to want to go over here and adjust the position based off of where the icon should be. The reason why I'm doing it at the center frame is because it's referenced to the null object, and the null object just barely crosses over. So that's how I know if I reference it to the center frame, it'll be off the screen. Okay, let's go ahead and change the anchor point down to... Actually, that's fine. And then change that x point to right here. Okay. Go ahead and take a look at that. There you go. Moving in and out. Now we're going to want to do the same thing that we did with the other one. We're going to apply some easy ease. And because I am doing it to the null object, I don't have to do all this work twice. Alright. Go ahead and highlight right here. Ah, I just figured out. It's because it's 60 frames a second, and it starts at 0. Or, you know. Anyway, let's scroll back to that. Go to Keyframe Assistant. Sorry, let me tell you what I just did here. I highlighted these three things right here. These three keyframes for the null object number 2, and I'm going to go ahead and go to Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. Let's just see what it does by default. It looks pretty good by default. We're gonna clean it up just a little bit, but yeah, it has that nice little period of time there where it's covered up completely. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the middle and verify that there are no transparent pixels. Okay, you can see that nice overlap right here, all the way up. That overlap between the orange. You can see the slightly less orange and slightly more white over there, or slightly less white. That means that we are good to go on that front. That means there's anti-aliasing being applied. But as a safety margin, I'm going to go ahead and change the null object's middle position just by a smidge. So I'm going to click on null object 2, and I'm going to change the x-axis to 960. And that just moves it over very slightly to the right. That's to give us a little bit of extra safety margin so that whenever the Stinger transition happens in OBS, we'll have a guarantee that it covered up the entirety of the screen. Okay. All right, so we already applied that easy ease, so let's go back over to the graph editor, and then let's click on the position for the graph, and we'll do the same thing we did beforehand. Select the middle, and we're going to change the influence out so that we can get a little, I think that's about good. This is more of an art than a science, guys. Let's keep that in mind. Alright, so at that middle frame, they're going to meet together, and then they're going to kind of kiss, and then open back up. So let's scroll in. And click out the graph editor, and let's scroll back to 0, and watch this in action. Perfect. That looks really nice, doesn't it? I could watch that several times. Alright, let's stop that. Alright. And because I've been working on an untitled project this entire time, I'm going to go ahead and save. And going to save my After Effects project. So I'm going to call this OBS Stinger. Bam. Okay. That's been saved. Now, the important part. How do we export something with transparency? Glad you asked. All right, let's go ahead and go to Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. And I sip of my beverage while this opens. Okay. It's going to take a second for this to pop up on the screen. There it goes. So, over here is your settings for your files. So down here is the render format. I'll explain why QuickTime Select in a second here. The preset that is being applied to it, and your output file. Excuse me. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and change the output file name from that to Stinger Transition. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and click over here on QuickTime. Alright, this is what's going to show us what's occurring when it's doing its rendering. You can see it comes in, they cross over, and then it comes back out. That's the timeline down here. Okay, so the important thing that we're going to make sure that we have on here is that it is exporting the correct the alpha channel. The alpha channel is the transparency channel. So we're going to go up here and we're going to find one of these that supports an alpha channel. I believe NTSC. Let's go ahead and go to frames I. That one doesn't support an alpha channel. Animation that does. There we go. Yep, just click on animation. And animation allows you to have this 8-bit color plus alpha channel. We're going to go ahead and change this to 1920 by 1080. Get that back to the correct aspect ratio. Unlink those. Get out of here. 1080. Okay. Match source on that, actually. Bam, we got that all set up and nice. Okay. So we're going to create this video codec animation. We have selected 8-bit color plus alpha. That is the key to exporting transparency. And then when it comes through, it's going to export with transparency. All right. Going to click the Start Export. And we should be good to go. And start. Okay, bam, that was really quick. Excellent. See, 2 seconds isn't very long to render. All right. And that was it, guys. This was my very first After Effects tutorial. Hope you find it entertaining or interesting or at least helpful. Anyway, my name has been Kevin Armentrout. This is Kevin Armentrout Photography. Thank you.